CFB Paint. Steve here riding solo like Jason Derulo on this one. Corey's out. The other two brothers have tapped out. It's just me. So get ready for lots of ums and ers and filler time. But week two recap, week three preview. Wanted to talk through some of what we saw and heard in week two. Couple of things. Pretty interesting week. I thought there was lots of compelling games to watch, starting with the Friday slate, BYU SMU, 5 o'clock my time, Mountain Time, to start the weekend. 18-15, little field goal fest, turnovers galore, 6 total turnovers in the game, but fun for my fellow BYU fans. I wasn't counting on a victory. Neither was Vegas. They were anywhere between 10 and 12-point underdogs. Come out with 3-point victory. You'll take that. SMU. It only gets tougher. I've got TCU this week and an ACC, a Power 4 conference slate ahead of them. So they'll have to make some adjustments. Kevin Jennings, I thought, showed you some things, gave you a spark, but going to need some more help. Going to need receivers to make some plays. I know that he probably still a work in progress as a passer, but it'll be interesting to see what SMU does going forward in their inaugural ACC season. BYU, we might be looking at a decent chance at a bowl game here. I'm going to say it too soon, but 2-0 looks like they'll pick one up against Wyoming on the road. I know it's a tough place to play, and often weather comes into play with wind and whatnot, but I am more bullish now than I've been heading into the season than I was heading into the season on BYU. Let's put it that way. The other game on Friday night, Duke Northwestern, double overtime game. Loved the fan was holding up the sign that said "Nerds" with the N as Northwestern and the D for Duke. Yeah, fun game to watch. Again, maybe not the highest caliber football you could see, but glad to see Duke get the win. I called for it on our last episode, and looked like they deserved to win kind of throughout most of the game. And yet it went to overtime, and even in overtime, there were some moments where it didn't look like they were going to pull it out. But Duke goes on the road. I really want to watch a game with Northwestern at home where they're playing on that practice field that's not at night, so you can get a better sense of how close it is to the lake. It looked like it was pretty windy with the winds coming off of Lake Michigan there in Chicago, and so anyway, fun one to watch. We'll see what the future holds for Duke and Northwestern. Both of their roads get a lot tougher. So 1-1 Northwestern, 2-0 Duke. Enjoy it while it lasts. All right, let's go into the Saturday slate. Texas, Michigan, probably the premier matchup of the week. I mean, Texas dominated basically from start to finish. There was a couple of moments where it looked like Michigan could be competitive. It didn't last very long. Michigan, I think the answer for them is really just kind of drag teams into the mud, make the game sloppy, make it so you're going to have to win defensive struggles. Your defense is probably going to have to hold most of the offenses it faces to, I don't know, between 17 and 24 points. How possible that is, I don't really know, but that's, I think, the recipe for Michigan is running the football. And when they couldn't run on Texas consistently, I don't think it's fair to ask. Well, I wouldn't expect their quarterbacks to be able to throw their way back into that game, and that turned out to be the case. Quinn Ewers looked pretty sharp. I think the big thing I wanted to say there is it'd been a minute since I had really seen him scramble to throw quite to that degree, and I think that really threw off Michigan's defense, where as soon as he broke a little bit of contain, the back end of their defense didn't really realize that they needed to stick with their assignments, and if he's going to get 4 or 5 yards, you need to let your linebackers clean that up. And he scrambled a number of times where it looked like he was in trouble in the backfield, scrambled, bought himself some time, and found open receivers downfield, particularly on third down. I felt like that was a big difference in this game. There was a number of times where Michigan got to decent leverage third downs, third and, let's say 5 or 6 plus, and weren't able to get off the field. So a big difference maker when you play that out over 60 minutes. So salute to the Longhorns. They look like one of the better teams in the country, and that's a big test that they cleared. Road game, great environment. I felt like they were the more physical team, by and large. Again, there's some talented players on that Michigan defensive line. Texas was able to handle that on their offensive line. I still want to see what Texas's um, what their interior rush defense looks like against maybe a more potent rushing attack between the tackles, which that sounds weird to say, knowing what Michigan's done over the last few years. But it just wasn't there for Michigan this time. So salute to the Texas interior getting the job done on Saturday. A couple of other games I wanted to call out. Notre Dame, Northern Illinois. Of course, we have to touch on this one. Man, I am one of those people that is just a sucker for an underdog team pulling together, scrapping and clawing and eking out a victory against an opponent that clearly has the measurables over them: bigger, stronger, faster, all of that. Northern Illinois, scrappy effort, did everything they had to win, and drove down the field to hit that game-winning field goal. Oh, he was close to hooking that thing. But yeah, for Northern Illinois, this is a springboard. This is an opportunity for them to really to assert themselves. I think we're all kind of intrigued to see what happens with that G5 playoff berth. You got to consider Northern Illinois in that pack right now. I think they've got a couple of other opportunities, and those opportunities, again, will be challenging at NC State in a couple of weeks. At Bowling Green gave Penn State all it could handle. So there's some opportunities to, again, notch some good victories and see where the chips fall. I think that's one to just keep an eye on going forward. Then we'll talk about Boise State in a minute. But there's an interesting race that's bubbling up there. Talking about another game that was interesting in the moment for a G5 school against a traditional power. South Florida held their own against Alabama. Now, when they lost control of the game, the wheels came off, right? And Bama really did a good job putting lipstick on a pig at the end of that game. But throughout that game, South Florida was physical. I love the way that their defensive line played against Alabama's offensive line. Had some chances, played that game tough. I'm big on Alex Golesh. I think that there are bright days in his future. The question for me is, how long is he at South Florida? And the awesome thing is they get in 2 weeks they get an opportunity to take a crack at another giant. They have Miami coming up, but before that they play. They play at Southern Miss this next week, but after that game against the Golden Eagles, they host the Miami Hurricanes in a night game in Tampa. So be interesting to see what they can do with that home field. Again, I don't think they're ones that typically pack a stadium, but they got another power at home, and we'll see if Alex Golesh can get the boys ready to play the Hurricanes, who look very, very buttoned up at this point in the season. So hat tip again to the Hurricanes. We like to clown on them this year. They look for real. But we saw that at the beginning of last year, so we'll have to see if that holds, and USF will perhaps be the next test for the Miami Hurricanes after they face Ball State this week. Let's see, a couple other games I wanted to tackle. I didn't get eyes on the Bowling Green Penn State game, but again, close game. Bowling Green's got some real athletes. They play pretty well. And so that's one to monitor going forward. I think the MAC has a little bit more talent than maybe I would have given it credit for going into the season. So that's fun to see. Some of those G5 teams and those G5 leagues acquit themselves well against the bigger traditional powers of the sport. Now let's talk Boise State, Oregon. First things first, I feel like this is one of those strange things where like Boise State plays a team almost to a tie, right? Up until tied with 4 minutes left or something like that. And Oregon gets the ball, drives down, bleeds the entire clock, and kicks a very short field goal to win. And with that, Boise State is unranked and Oregon is ranked 7. That doesn't sit well with me. Like, okay, they're clearly in that. Not to mention that Oregon needed a punt return for a touchdown and a kick return for a touchdown to get there. So perhaps some work for Boise State special teams to try and shore some things up. But that's a dangerous team that can really run the football against essentially anyone. Ashton Jeanty is a really special back. Excited to see him continue to perform throughout the year. And if they are that G5 team in the playoff, I don't know if they can make a run because they can't really throw the football, or at least haven't been able to show me anything that's really leads me to believe that they'll be able to pass the ball on a top 12-ish opponent. But Ashton Jeanty it may not matter, right? He's one of those backs that can carry a team to a victory or two. So there's a long way to go, but Boise State looks prepared to do that. Looking at their schedule, there's some challenges on that with the Mountain West slate that they have, and facing both Oregon State and Washington State from the Pac-12, Pac-2, whatever you want to call it. Opportunities for them to again make some more statement wins and perhaps put themselves in position to garner that G5 playoff berth. A couple of others I'll touch on real quick. Baylor, Utah, real fast. Cam Rising is important to Utah. That's pretty clear. Out to a 23-0 lead, if memory serves. And then he gets injured and the game tightens up a little bit. Apparently the hand apparently is fine, is what last I read. It seems like they don't expect it to be a long-term thing, but that's for someone that has the injury history that Cam Rising has, that's worth watching going forward. Is can he stay available for the majority of the season, if not all of the season, whether it's this hand injury or anything else. He's just has had struggles with injury, and that's been unfortunate for him, but he's a really critical piece of that Utah offense. And it's going to be important for them as they shift gears. I know that one technically didn't count as a Big 12 game with Baylor, with that already being scheduled, and too late to schedule a different out-of-conference opponent. But Utah, if they're going to be a favorite in the Big 12, they're going to need Cam Rising to be available. USC does not suffer a letdown after beating LSU in week 1, 48-0 on Utah State. Pretty impressive. No notes from me. A couple of other quick ones we'll talk through. Tennessee, NC State. They got boat raced. The Wolfpack did by the Vols. Wow. Again, the Volunteers look like a pretty complete team at this point. It wasn't always pretty. Nico threw a couple of interceptions, and it wasn't all pretty. But again, for it not being all pretty and winning by 41 points, that's pretty impressive. Tennessee looks primed to make a run in the SEC, so I'm excited to see what that looks like. Houston gets up off the mat and gives Oklahoma basically everything it can handle in week 2 after looking pretty pedestrian, I guess is a good way to say it, in week 1 against UNLV. Willie Fritz will get the players to play hard, and it's going to be a long project there, but I'm on team Willie Fritz. I think he's a guy that can get the job done. I guess I skipped this one from earlier in the Saturday slate. Oklahoma State, Arkansas, great comeback win for the Cowboys. And yeah, Arkansas looks pretty well improved year over year. I think having a dynamic athlete at quarterback and Bobby Petrino to call plays is a winning combination. See Lamar Jackson in Louisville in 2016. So Arkansas, I think, is going to find ways to be in some games that coming into the season we may have not expected. Oklahoma State, well, great team win, way to bounce back, get some stops, and score some points. Overtime game, fun one, very entertaining start to finish. Kansas State, Tulane. I didn't get too many eyes on this one. I know there were some questionable calls toward the end, but Kansas State escapes the road game with a victory. Avery Johnson is a pretty special player. I don't think we've seen him fully unleashed yet, but excited to see what comes of that going forward. A couple of other ones I want to spend just a few minutes on. Iowa State, Iowa. Man, we talked about this one on our last call. I really felt like Iowa was in a good position to win this game and win it sort of comfortably, and everything looked great. That second half, man, the offense really stalled, and credit to Iowa State for never hanging their heads, but keep working and keep pushing to get stops and to move the ball. 14 points in the third quarter really changed the tone of the game. And of course, the game-winning field goal from deep was pretty amazing. So hats off to the Cyclones, and excited to see what they have in store for the rest of the Big 12 race, or I guess for the rest of it as they start to transition toward it. Of course, that being the Cyhawk being a Big 10, Big 12 matchup. Let's see. Any others that I wanted to quickly? Oh, real quick, Southern Cal, or not Southern Cal, sorry. Oh, South Carolina, the other USC, uh, beating the brakes off of Kentucky. I didn't see that coming. Did y'all see that coming? That was impressive. LSU comes to town next. I don't think you're going to get the same result 2 weeks in a row. Cal beating Auburn and picking off, what was it, 3 passes, 4 passes? Take a quick look at that. Cal, physical bunch. They're a pretty good team. Play together. I thought that they looked decent. Oh, 5 turnovers for Auburn in total. Let's see. What was the number of interceptions they threw? Let's take a quick peek at that. Yeah, 4 interceptions. That's right. Peyton Thorne has his limitations. Let's put it that way. Cal, great road win. Yeah, we'll see what Cal is as they transition again to ACC play in a couple of weeks here. Let's see, what do they have coming up next? They play at San Diego State. Okay, I guess not their final non-conference game, is it? Oh yeah, they play Oregon State as well. Okay, so their final non-conference game before sort of shifting toward ACC play, where they play not a friendly start to their ACC play if you just like on paper, right? So they're at Florida State, which, hey, if you can run the football, which Cal certainly can, uh, you may leave Tallahassee with a victory, and after that you host Miami with a bye week in between. So the Golden Bears earned a big one. Excited to see what they have for the ACC after they play San Diego State this coming week. I'll quickly scroll through any others that I wanted to call out from last week. Nothing else is jumping off. Oh, Texas State, the Bobcats. They will also have something to say about the G5 participant in the playoff. 49-10, they boat raced Texas San Antonio. They have a really fun challenge this coming week where they host Arizona State, who also is coming off of a nice win over Mississippi State in the desert in one of the later games. I don't know if I have anything else from week 2 to talk through. Just a quick scan here. No, I don't think so. I guess Colorado, Nebraska. I mean, Nebraska sort of jumped all over Colorado, and then from there was able to just play really good defense. Of course, they did have the pick 6 early on. That'll certainly help, and the fortunate bounce on the one touchdown where the Colorado defender jumps the route beautifully and just doesn't quite catch it. It hops over, and the Nebraska receiver is able to catch it. Like that's an unfortunate bounce. If you're a Buffs fan, Nebraska, I think, is an intriguing team. They play great defense. They're not asking their freshman QB to do too much. He's playing fine. I wouldn't say he's stellar, but that is an unfair expectation for a true freshman. But they got to be really excited about both what this year brings, or what this year can hold, and certainly what the future can bring from a recruiting standpoint, program building standpoint. Matt Rule is one of the best in the business. I think they finally got the right man in Lincoln to lead the Huskers back to prominence. So that's exciting. I saw on Twitter, I think it's the first time since 2016 that Nebraska, Miami, and I'm going to forget the other one, are all 2-0. Another team that's just been mired in mediocrity, and I'm not remembering it right off the top of my head, but it's exciting to see some of those traditional powers that have been down for a while maybe begin to reemerge. Again, it's early. I don't want to draw too many conclusions here, but Nebraska looks like a tough out. They play pretty good defense. Colorado, we'll have to see. We'll have to see what comes of it. A lot of people are taking victory laps on Coach Prime. I feel like we might be starting to see more and more of those cracks, but opportunity for them to bounce back against Colorado State and recalibrate from there. I don't know what the word is on Shiloh Sanders other than he had some sort of like a broken arm, it seems like, surgery. So I don't know if he'll return this season. So that's not great when you can when you lose one of your defensive leaders and certainly one of the alpha personalities on that team. So we'll see what happens for the Buffs. Outside of that, I don't know if I had too many other Highlights. I guess just one more observation from one of the late games. Washington State can play, and that quarterback that they have, Mateer, is a pretty interesting dual threat. I am excited to see that Apple Cup and what comes of that. Um, but we'll maybe talk through some of those games in week 3 in just a minute here. Um, I guess before I move forward, I want to just call out, we haven't done any win totals draft updates. We'll get that updated and talk through that next week with Corey on the call. But yeah, it's been an interesting ride to say the least. I think that exercise that we do always is helpful for me to kind of understand where my expectations are for certain teams going into the season, and then seeing how reality versus my expectations maybe differ, and how that changes throughout the season, because you have teams that really find themselves and play their best football those last few weeks of the season, and others are strong from the get-go, but maybe there's injuries, or after they put some things on tape, other teams are able to game plan appropriately for them. We'll have to see what comes of it. But yeah, some interesting developments thus far in the college football season. Now, a couple things. Week 3 starts off with some pretty solid midweek games. Like I mentioned already, Arizona State going on the road to San Marcos, Texas to take on the Bobcats of Texas State. GJ Kinney's got them coached up. Let's see what happens. I'm actually really interested to see this, because these are two programs. Texas State was, again, expected to win. I think 8.5 games is what the win totals over under were for their team heading into the season. So far, they haven't done anything to really change my opinion of them. If not, if anything, they've improved their opinion. This Arizona State team is a different challenge. They run the football. Scatabo is a really impressive back, a workhorse, and it's a team that fights hard. That's the thing that I think that we've seen since Kenny Dillingham has taken over the Arizona State program. That team plays hard. They fight to the whistle, and they're going to do whatever they can to make the game close and keep the game close. They did that against USC last year. They did it against Washington last year. Two teams which, on paper, they were well overmatched with, but they're a scrappy team. They take on the mentality of their head coach. And then GJ Kinney is an interesting case study and an up-and-comer in the coaching world. I think if they have a really successful season this year, I don't think they need this win to do it, but if they have a really successful season, there's going to be opportunities for him to move up the coaching ranks, and I think rather quickly. So that's an exciting one to get the weekend started off. Again, by weekend, I mean like the college football games of the week. That is Thursday at 7:30 Eastern. Friday, a couple of interesting games as well. Again, we've talked a little bit about some of those that are competing and contending for that G5 playoff spot. UNLV, I would throw in that mix as well. Their opportunity to make a statement on the road at Kansas is is interesting to say the least. Kansas obviously coming off the loss to Illinois this past week. How do they bounce back? Is UNLV able to stay in that game right now? I guess the current spread is KU -7. So we'll see if they can do that on the road. The other game that week, Arizona, Kansas State. I wanted to say, actually, before we're starting to go through week 3, there are a couple of teams that I've got alarm bells sounding off in my head. We talked about one of them already, Auburn. I think the inability to get the passing game going against Cal is concerning to me, especially since you're going to face some really tough run defenses throughout the rest of the year that will force you to pass. And they have decent wide receivers, but if a quarterback can't consistently deliver the ball in a place where his man has an opportunity to catch it, and in some cases only his man, it could be a long season for Auburn. I'm also going to sound the alarm bell on Arizona. I mean, you have Noah Fifita, who's I think still adapting to this change. I think Jed Fish's system was really good for him, but there's got to be more offensive support than just T-Mac. You saw this past week against Northern Arizona, they really struggled when T-Mac wasn't able to get it going. So got to find some other playmakers and other options to to take advantage of when the defense is keying in on T-Mac. So they are on the road against Kansas State this week, Friday night at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, I guess 8 p.m. Eastern on Fox. So we'll see what happens there. That one's an interesting one because I think Kansas State has also had their struggles in both of their games so far. So we'll see. It looks like currently KSU's favored by 7. I lean KSU to cover on that one. We'll talk about my official plays later, and that's not one of them. But yeah, a couple of teams where I'm like, I don't know. And I'm also going to put the alarm bell on Oregon as well. 2 weeks now, you haven't really been able to run the football. And I just think that's going to be problematic against some of the other teams that are on your schedule, specifically Ohio State. I think that one looks, even though it's in Eugene, I think that one becomes a bigger, that becomes a real challenge. And so we'll have to see. Boise State went into Eugene this last week, took them to the brink, nearly finished them off with one superstar running back. Ohio State happens to have two, plus a better complement of receivers, a more capable quarterback. I think that's going to be a problem for the Ducks, but we'll see what happens. There's some time between here and there for the Ducks to try and tinker and get things figured out. They have a couple of other games that I would expect them to be favored in, but Oregon's on that list of teams that I'm going to call alarm bell teams heading into week 3. All right. Other previews for this coming week. Saturday, we'll turn to the Saturday slate. Alabama on the road at Wisconsin. Alabama's favored by 16. I don't think that's enough, frankly. So I don't know if I have a ton to add to that one. Just more so, Bama, didn't look great against USF. I honestly think USF is better than Wisconsin. But factor in the Bama's on the road and there's a pretty significant travel element. Maybe the Badgers can make it a game. I feel like it's early in Luke Fickell's tenure as the Wisconsin head coach. Nonetheless, I feel like there's starting to be kind of mounting pressure. Even though they started 2-0, they haven't looked especially dominant in either of those games against Western Michigan and South Dakota. So I think the people of Madison and the fans are a little concerned with what they have. And this is the first real test to get a sense of, okay, were we really trying to hold a lot back and save something for this really marquee out of conference game? Or is there really a problem that, we weren't able to put up significant amounts of offense against two teams that were likely pretty overmatched? So challenge for them. We'll see what comes of that. LSU, South Carolina. South Carolina coming off of a huge win against Kentucky on the road. Really impressive from a defensive standpoint. They were able to get things going offensively as well. I don't expect that to continue. I think this line is way too small. It's a 7-point road favorites for LSU. I know they didn't look great against Nicholls State. I'm calling that one a hangover game after the loss to USC in Las Vegas. I think that they have the requisite offensive line to not give up as many pressures as Kentucky did to the South Carolina defensive front. I think this is a get-right game for LSU. Give me LSU to cover the spread. We'll talk about our official picks, but that one's one that I'll be keeping an eye on. This week is kind of sparse when it comes to like marquee matchups, but I do think there's some sneaky good games. One that I'll call out, being an FSU fan, does FSU get up off the mat? And it's fun from a storylines perspective because Mike Norvell came from Memphis. Memphis on paper looks like a pretty tough opponent. I like the Tigers to cover the spread here. I think they'll probably win the game outright. I think there's trouble brewing in Tallahassee. So that one's a noon game. So if you're one that likes to see the Noles lose, I might suggest you tune in. That'll be interesting. Memphis is another one of those teams that has an opportunity to again make a statement and throw their hat in the ring when it comes to the G5 playoff participant. A couple of others that I'm intrigued to see: Miami of Ohio taking on Cincinnati. Miami of Ohio taking on Cincinnati. Cincinnati gave up a really tragic tragic for them, I should say. A comeback victory to the Pitt Panthers. Miami of Ohio had a rough game against Northwestern, again playing in the wind, but I'm interested. They're hosting Cincinnati. They are only 2.5 point dogs at this point, so we'll see what comes of that one. I think that one's an interesting game. Here's a game that I think some people are intrigued by that I'm not. Missouri Boston College. I think it's one of two ranked matchups this week. Uh, Let me make this clear. Like, Missouri's going to win this game. I don't think it's going to be particularly close. I think they have enough defense to keep Thomas Castellanos in check, and yeah, I don't think Boston College will be able to slow down Missouri's offense. Uh, so that one is maybe like an interesting matchup just because there's numbers next to both of those teams. I don't expect that one to be a particularly competitive game. Oregon goes on the road against Oregon State. I'm glad that the Civil War is still taking place. I don't know if they've renamed that rivalry. I think they did just because of the connotations of Civil War. That's what I know it as. But the Beavers, do they have something for Oregon? Thus far, everyone's had something for Oregon, so we'll have to see. New stadium, and this has got to be Oregon State's Super Bowl, so it will be a tough road environment. I am interested to see it. I don't really suspect that Oregon State can keep it close, but uh, get them some momentum, keep that crowd in the game, and see what happens because Oregon's not shown an ability to put a team away when they've been able to establish leads, both against Idaho and then against Boise State, in-state rival. Anything can happen, so I'm excited to see that one. The other one of the former Pac-12 rivalries that was broken up is also taking place this week. Washington versus Washington State. This one being played in Seattle, but not at Husky Stadium. So that's interesting that that's the case. I don't think it necessarily changes the home field advantage that much. I still think this will be decidedly in Washington's favor. I think Washington State might have a better team right now. So the real question is the rushing attack for Washington goes through Coleman. The rushing attack for Washington State thus far goes through the quarterback. So be interested to see if either one of those teams is able to key in on that. Well, Washington State to this point hasn't really faced a formidable rushing attack. They faced Texas Tech, but by and large likes to spread the ball out and throw it more. And Portland State was kind of just overmatched. And even then, they had some pretty big busts, mostly in the passing game. But Washington has taken care of business thus far, but I wouldn't say they've looked especially impressive in this one. I'm excited to see this game. I think this one is going to be close. I think there's certainly added motivation on the Pac-2, Pac-12 teams to win those rivalry games. So we'll see what that actually translates to in terms of effort and energy on the field. But definitely tuning in for that one. Um, Texas A&M on the road at Florida. This is mostly interesting from is DJ Lagway starting at Florida this year and then moving to Texas A&M next year, sort of a deal. Yeah, I think it's DJ Lagway's turn at Florida at this point. He looks pretty special for a freshman. The question is he able to do it against an improved Texas A&M defense or a slightly retooled Texas A&M defense, coming off of a win against an overmatched opponent in who they play, Tarleton State. I'm going to forget it now. McNeese State. And so this is an important one for either of those teams, especially Florida. If you're looking to try and make a bowl, you got to have this one, I think. And if not, things are going to start to turn on Billy Napier, I think. I'm concerned about his future is an understatement at this point. A couple of other quick ones that I wanted to just take a second to talk through. Virginia Tech goes on the road at Old Dominion. Stop me if you've heard this before, but Virginia Tech, now I just want to pull up the Winsipedia and see exactly what their record is against Old Dominion, but this one just, I know it's a 14-point spread for Virginia Tech. This one just looks like one that they could lay an egg on, especially after a disappointing effort on the road at Vandy. Another hostile environment here, but like just a road game, right? And we'll see what the Hokies can do, but critical. And Old Dominion is 0-2, but that doesn't mean that they haven't been competitive in those two games. In fact, let me pull those up. So they lost by 4 against South Carolina on the road in week 1, and lost 20-14 at home versus East Carolina. I don't know. I could see that one getting a little squirrely, and um, we'll see what happens with Old Dominion hosting the Hokies. A couple of other games that I wanted to just take a few minutes to talk through. Where is it? Georgia on the road at Kentucky. Um, I think Georgia will win. I think Kentucky might cover the spread just because that's what Kentucky does against Georgia. It feels like every single year. I don't I don't feel super strongly about that. That one's interesting. Uh, Auburn hosts New Mexico. Last year they lost to New Mexico State, if you'll recall. So after the Aggies did it, can the Lobos see their SEC upset of 2023 and match with their own? I love Dampier. They quarterback for New Mexico. I think they play hard under Bronco. I don't think they have the firepower to get it done against Auburn, but let that game be close at halftime, and we'll see what happens. We'll see if the Tiger faithful actually are rallying behind the team. I think there's some angst in that fan base already. Cal, I think, was kind of an inexcusable loss. If you wanted to have a really strong season, you needed to have that one if you're Auburn. So we'll see what comes of that. Um, yeah, just I don't think anything will happen there, but just leave New Mexico in that game for a little bit. Let them get some belief and see what happens. Um, as far as the nightcap goes, there's really no super compelling matchup that I guess for my BYU friends, we'll talk about that one. So you're on the road in Laramie, Wyoming, taking on the Cowboys of Wyoming. There's mystery here. Wyoming always seems to play BYU tough. Wyoming also hasn't looked particularly competitive, and uh, certainly not in week 1. This last week against Idaho, they lost in a close game, but losing on the road at Arizona State 48-7 doesn't really inspire a whole lot of confidence in me. So with that in mind, I think BYU is going to go to 3-0, which is, hey, you're on pace. I think their win total for the season was 4.5, and if you're 3 out of 3 to start it, finding another single win, or another 2 wins, I should say, to exceed that win total, I think is certainly on the table. So we'll see about that. I wanted to pivot now and talk through some of our picks against the number. So for this most recent week, I chose, just to refresh your memory here, and to refresh my page. So I chose Duke plus 2.5 at Northwestern. That hit. Iowa -3 at Iowa State. Man, it felt really good. At halftime, it ended up not being the case. Iowa State wins on a last-second field goal. Mizzou covered the 34.5 versus Buffalo. Ole Miss covered the -41 against. I don't even have their opponent written down in here, but Ole Miss played. I'm gonna forget who they played. Um, Goodness, that's going to bug me. I don't know who it is, and I'm not going to take the time to look it up. So Ole Miss covered that spread. And then I also chose Old Dominion to cover versus East Carolina. Nope. Nevada +1 versus Georgia Southern. Nope. Oregon -19.5 at Boise State. Nope. Auburn -12.5 versus Cal. Nope. Cal won the game outright. So for week 2, I went 3-5 in my 8 picks. That gives me a season total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I'm 1 game under 500 for the year. Corey, with his discipline, I'm only going to select 3 picks. The last 2 weeks is 2-1. So this most recent week, again, Texas covering the spread versus Michigan. That one was as easy as they come. And again, Iowa State Iowa -3 versus Iowa State, I should say. Sure looked good. until it wasn't. And then Tennessee -8 versus NC State. So Corey on the right side of 500. He's 4-3 on the year. I am 7-8 on the year. So maybe a little bit more disciplined. Maybe paring it back to ones that I feel a little bit more confident in should be the move this week. But you guys know me, and I love to just kind of try and pick them because, again, I'm not putting money on them because I've historically proven that I can't pick them. But I'm excited to see what comes of this week. So a couple of them that I'll highlight as of interest to me: Texas State +1 against Arizona State, yeah, I should say Arizona State -1 there. Here's the way I see that game playing out. I think Arizona State has a fine defense. It's not great, but it's serviceable. Texas State has a good offense, but they haven't faced a defense quite like what Arizona State fields just yet. Again, Texas State has played UTSA, and now I'm forgetting who else they played. But so I see this game going under is what I mostly expect. Arizona State's going to run the football. They're pretty physical up front. Scadaboo is a really good running back. I see this game going under the 58.5 point total. So I'm going to say under in the Arizona State Texas State game as my first play. The next one, Alabama -15.5 versus Wisconsin. I think they cover that number. I don't really think Wisconsin's particularly good. Bama has certainly has some flaws, and it'll be interesting to see how they travel for the first time. I expect them to take care of business on that game. I know that they weren't pretty, and it was a little bit sloppy against USF. I do expect them to clean things up just a little bit, and I trust that Kalen DeBoer is going to have an offensive plan that's going to put them in a position to score enough points. And I don't think Wisconsin can keep pace. So be interested to see if that happens. Another one that I'm going to make an official play, LSU -7 on the road at South Carolina. Tough place to play until you quiet the crowd, and I think that they do that. I think they're able to do that early. South Carolina, I really don't trust what they have offensively. The defensive line is good, but I think LSU's offensive line is up to the task. And I think this is where LSU kind of a get right game. This game after a little bit of a hangover against Nicholls State after the high profile matchup and kind of the emotional drain that took place in Las Vegas when they dropped a game late to USC. Another official play of mine here, Memphis +6.5 at Florida State. I think I mentioned this earlier. I think the Noles are just going to be an auto play until they prove me wrong. They have been favorites of 10.5 versus Georgia Tech and almost 17 against Boston College and lost both of those games outright. So I feel okay with Memphis coming in. Memphis is going to cover that. So there's another pick. I really quickly want to check. Let's see here. I must have scrolled past it. Oh, okay. Yeah. Virginia Tech, Old Dominion. I'd keep an eye on that game. I wonder if that game's within 14. I'd be interested to see that one. Not an official play for me, but I expect that one to be not pretty. Let's see here. I must have scrolled past it. Give me just a second here. Oh, I missed this one when talking about some of the opening game or the games of the week, and this one's just a fun one to see. Some of the Big 12 is starting to shake out. UCF on the road at TCU. The Horned Frogs are 1-point favorites at home versus UCF. UCF got the ground game going this last week. I think that one is an offense. You can see the over-under on it is 61.5 points, so Vegas is expecting a fair amount of fireworks. That one will just be a fun game, not a play for me, but I just saw that when scrolling through and forgot to mention that as well. The next play that I've got, here it is, UTSA, Texas. Texas, again, coming off of a big win. I still think they're going to be able to cover the 34.5 versus UTSA. So give me the Longhorns to cover that large number. I think that they'll still do that even if they go to the reserves. I think their reserves can still score. UTSA gave up a boatload of points to Texas State this past week. think they'll do the same with the Longhorns. So that is an official play for me. I think that will do it for my official plays for this week. I didn't get any from Corey. He's the one you really want to pay attention to, but looking forward to getting on the right side of 500 heading into next week. I don't know if I have any parting shots because it's just me. I've already given you most of what I had for this week. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Make this one a little bit shorter, a little bit sweeter since it's just Steve running a stream of consciousness. Thanks for listening. If you made it this far, I tip my cap to you, and we will be back next week to break down week 3 and look forward to week 4. College football is just great. I just maybe to close it off, yeah, who doesn't love when you see an underdog take a team to the brink and even then like rise up and win. NIU, their head coach Thomas Haddock, I'm a fan now, officially a fan. Love to see what they have what they have going forward, and just love. That's what I love about the sport is when you can see a team rally together. Maybe they don't have all the measurables, but they execute a game plan. They play tough. They're gritty. They don't hang their heads when something bad happens to them. They keep playing the next play, and they're able to accomplish things that clearly no one outside of that locker room really expected them to do. Even listening to the call of that 62-yard or 64-yard field goal attempt that Notre Dame tried at the end of the game to try and steal a victory, like listen to the radio call from the NIU side, and you'll hear just the elation and the surprise that they were able to pull it off. So good on the NIU Huskies, and look forward to more of those. I think there's a couple of opportunities this week for that to take place. I mentioned, with Old Dominion, that's one that I'm interested in. Texas State with Arizona State, a couple of others that could get intriguing. You may find lots of people scrambling to switch stations and tune into a game that maybe they initially weren't planning on, but based on the score, they're going to go and see if the David can knock off Goliath. So thanks, and appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next week.